I'll open with a chant. Om Dyo Shanti, Antariksham Shanti, Prithvi Shanti, Apa Shanti, Oshadhaya Shanti, Vanaspataya Shanti, Vishvedeva Shanti, Brahma Shanti, Sarvam Shanti, Shantireva Shanti, Sama Shantireti, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om, may there be peace on earth. May there be peace in heaven. May there be peace in the waters, the herbs, and the plants. May peace abide amongst all heavenly beings. May peace pervade the universe. May that peace, real peace, be ours. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Nice to see familiar faces and also some new faces. Today's topic is Karma Yoga for the Jnani. So let's begin by asking ourselves what should be our motive for working. Vivekananda tells us, work constantly. Work, but be not attached. Be not caught. Reserve unto yourself the power of detaching yourself from everything, however beloved, however much the soul might yearn for it. So how can we attain that power of detachment? That's a pretty tall order. Well, in Karma Yoga, we work with simple detachment, with a desire to be free. We just had a Karma Yoga day yesterday. So that is the attitude that we go into with Karma Yoga. In Bhakti Yoga, we offer all of our actions to our chosen ideal in worship, at the beginning and at the end, and try as much as possible throughout our Karma Yoga. One who surrenders and is bonded to the beloved, as described in Acts 17:28, in him we live, move, and have our being, knows, as a servant of God, I am the machine and he is the operator. I do as he does through me. I speak as he speaks through me. I move as he moves through me. And in Raja Yoga, we use work as a means to develop concentration of mind, thought control, self-control, and mindfulness. Meditation itself is a form of Karma Yoga. Sri Ramakrishna describes, I am the chariot, and thou art the driver. In his lecture, The Way to Blessedness, Vivekananda reminds us that Nachiketa was taught to engage in action according to the example from the Katha Upanishad, and we can all read this in the first chapter, section 3, verse 3. This body is the chariot. The organs of the senses are the horses. The mind is the reins, the intellect is the charioteer, and the soul is the rider in the chariot. He goes on, when the soul joins himself with the charioteer, the buddhi or intellect, and then through it with the mind, the reins, and through it again with the organs, the horses, he is said to be the enjoyer. He perceives, he works, he acts. He whose mind is not under control and who has no discrimination, Vivekananda continues, his senses are not controllable like vicious horses in the hands of a driver. But he who has discrimination, whose mind is controlled, his organs are always controllable like good horses in the hands of a driver. He receives that truth, attaining which There is no rebirth. So that's a really tall order that comes with karma yoga. So let's analyze these different approaches to non-attached action. The bhakta offers or surrenders action. The Raja Yogi remembers the self is separate from the buddhi. Now remember, in the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali's commentary, that is Sankhya Yoga, that is a dualistic yoga. But Vivekananda purposely called his commentary on the Yoga Sutras Raja Yoga, which comes from the Tantras, which is non-dualistic. So the Raja Yogi remembers the self is separate from the buddhi, higher mind that holds the reins of the senses and the organs of actions. And in this way, Raja Yogi uses work to develop concentration, mindfulness, and self-control. So this non-attachment purifies the mind so that knowledge can dawn. And the elements of Raja Yoga, those practices that develop equanimity of mind, are prerequisites to the full-on practice of karma yoga as the Jnani. So what are they? Well, we turn to Ramakrishna for that. He taught his devotees that they should be practical in day-to-day life. In fact, common sense is a prerequisite to jnana, because developing this preliminary sound judgment, which is fundamental to the development of viveka, stabilizes the mind. One can't make any practice or progress in spiritual life if one is careless or unmindful, even in small matters, especially in small matters in the beginning. Ramakrishna scolded Yogin, the future Yogananda, for being fooled when he purchased a cracked pot without first examining it. He said the shopkeeper is there to conduct his business, not to practice religion. Why did you believe him and get deceived? Be a devotee, but don't be a fool. M explained the deep significance of Sri Ramakrishna's watchful training. He said, if an aspirant is not careful and vigilant, Maya will cheat him through lust and gold. But once when M forgot to bring Sri Ramakrishna's umbrella to the Panchavati, the master scolded him also. He said, while in ecstasy, it's hard for me to keep the cloth on my body, yet I do not make such a mistake. See the training. The master was also very, very particular about cleanliness and tidiness, not wasting anything even if it's free. He was also particular about orderliness and the importance of self-reliance. All this detailed training in such external matters was to develop Raja Yoga, mindfulness and equanimity within the devotees. He explained, he who can keep an account of salt can also keep an account of sugar candy. See, so we begin with the basics, and then we expand to the highest. And we find Sri Krishna endorsing this truth in the Bhagavad Gita, 5th chapter, verses 4 to 5. He said, the yoga of action, say the ignorant, is different from the yoga of knowledge of Brahman. The wise see knowledge and action as one. They see truly. Take either path and tread it to the end. The end is the same. There the followers of action meet the seekers after knowledge in equal freedom. So in Raja Yoga, the aspirant remembers the self is separate from the buddhi, this higher intellect. It is the higher mind that holds the reins of the senses and the organs of action. So that brings distance between the witnessing yogi and his or her mind. The aspirant thus gains the ability to witness the mind, and from that perspective develops detachment, calmness, clarity, and equanimity. And all of you probably are Raja Yogis. You've had the opportunity to watch the mind, and you know what happens. A watched mind calms down and behaves. And then we can gather the forces of the mind. So this practice and process of gaining equanimity of mind is superior to mere renunciation of action, and itself leads to jnana. Swami Prabhupada explained in his Gita commentary, which is soon to come out, called Living the Gita, he explained all four yogas complement and overlap one another. Karma yoga encompasses jnana yoga, just as jnana yoga encompasses karma yoga. In fact, the highest form of karma yoga can only be practiced in genuine meditation, which is Raja Yoga. Now, we naturally ask, how does karma yoga then operate in jnana yoga? The difference in karma yoga, there is a difference in the karma yoga of yesterday and today. Karma yoga in past times meant Vedic rituals performed without desire. So Advaita Acharyas taught it only as a preparatory step leading to Jnana Yoga. Non-attached action in their thought purifies mind, but the non-dualists asserted that Karma Yoga is not a means to self-realization. Once purified, the mind, the aspirant attains self-realization through vichara, discrimination on the nature of the impermanence of this world, and self-inquiry. However, Vivekananda revolutionized the role of Karma Yoga in Jnana Yoga. He redefined its place and its utility in the path of jnana. His source? Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. In the Gita, 5th chapter, verses 4 through 5, Sri Krishna explained. So let us read carefully. The yoga of action, say the ignorant, is different from the yoga of the knowledge of Brahman. The wise see knowledge and action as one. They see truly. Take either path and tread it to the end. The end is the same. There the followers of action meet the seekers after knowledge in equal freedom. So in other words, Karma Yoga serves not just as a preparatory stage of purification for the pursuit of Jnana Yoga, but as a yoga, it also leads to freedom and the highest realization. Vivekananda revived and propounded Sri Krishna's teaching of Karma Yoga. In his New York lecture, Karma in its Effect on Character, delivered December 13th, 1895, he said, "Every mental and physical blow that is given to the soul, by which, as it were, fire is struck from it, and by which its own power and knowledge are discovered, is karma, this word being used in its widest sense." So this Karma Yoga strikes fire. It brings out power of the soul. It illumines and empowers. So then what is the role of Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga? Let's begin with the culmination of these two practices. First, the Jnani established in the self knows he never acts. So there is no work to surrender or renounce. This is the state of the Jnani. The Jnani practices the witness consciousness to remain established in the higher self, free from activity, the knower of the field, which is this body-mind complex. Sri Ramakrishna explained this attitude. God alone exists and is the doer. If we can sincerely perform actions knowing we are not the doer, we receive neither their good nor their bad effects. We receive instead the infinite result, union with Brahman. But how? How can we be established in this truth? How can we drive this truth home within ourselves? It seems so lofty. Again, Swami Prabhupada, in his Gita commentary, explains the process. He says, the Jnani, who follows the path of knowledge, analyzes that the Atman, in essence, is not active at all. It is the impersonal reality, actionless and unchangeable, dwelling in the hearts of all, even while the body, mind, senses, and ego remain in the flux of Prakriti, or nature. The body acts, the mind thinks, the senses feel, and the ego identifies with the body, mind, and senses. But through this process of discrimination, the Jnani tries to disidentify with the transitory nature of the psychophysical being and strives instead to attain oneness with the unchanging Atman, the witness separate from nature and the forces of the gunas. For example, the Swami goes on, when a disturbing thought wave arises in the mind, the Jnani strives to remain unaffected, merely observing it until it subsides. As Sri Krishna explained earlier to Arjuna in the 2nd chapter, verse 70, water flows continually into the ocean of Brahman, but the ocean is never disturbed. Desire flows into the mind of the seer, but he is never disturbed. Now, these are wonderful examples that we can wrap our heads around and try to remember. And these examples, when we try to remember them, bring us back to that poised state. Unlike in bhakti, and especially Raja Yoga, wherein meditation itself is a form of karma yoga, for the Jnani, who is established in knowledge, meditation and self-inquiry are not karma yoga. Rupert Spira, in Being Aware of Being Aware, writes from the Jnana perspective. He writes, thus, for most people, meditation, self-inquiry, or contemplative prayer will seem, at least initially, to be an activity that they, as a separate self, practice. And only gradually, as their understanding matures and their practice is refined, will self-inquiry give way to self-abidance, self-resting, or self-surrender. Spira continues, that is only gradually, in most cases, will it become clear that meditation is what we are, not what we do, and that the separate self and the finite mind is what we do and not what we are. So what the perfected karma yogi and Raja Yoga also experiences, the Jnana Yoga aspirant adheres to as an affirmation practice. Sri Krishna describes in the Gita, 4th chapter, verse 18, he who sees the inaction that is in action, and the action that is in inaction, is wise indeed. Swami Vivekananda calls this the secret of work and the goal of Vedanta. Vivekananda said, when we come to that non-attachment, then we can understand the marvelous mystery of the universe, how it is intense activity and vibration, and at the same time, intensest peace and calm, how it is work every moment and rest every moment. That is the mystery of the universe, the impersonal and personal in one, the infinite and finite in one. So imagine being in the presence of one who embodies this. What is that like? In the 1980s, Mrs. Vera Edwards, who was an elderly and long-time devotee and sevak of Swami Asheshananda, disciple of Holy Mother, shared with me that once a woman who was staying in an apartment building in New York during Swami Vivekananda's visit to the West told her great aunt that she happened to look out her window and saw Vivekananda turbaned and wearing Western dress on the street below. She said to Vera's great aunt, when once you saw him, you could never forget him. This is what it's like to have the darshan of someone who is established in that kind of karma yoga. How does that experience, seeing inaction in action, manifest in the Jnani yogi? Not by avoiding work. Sri Krishna says in the Gita, the 3rd chapter, verses 4 and 5, freedom from activity is never achieved by abstaining from action. Nobody can become perfect by merely ceasing to act. In fact, nobody can ever rest from his activity, even for a moment. All are helplessly forced to act by the gunas. So freedom from activity is often misunderstood. Some aspirants think to meditate on God without distractions, they must retreat from the world. Well, it's good to go on retreats. It is, because we get very caught up in the busyness of life. But those who try to escape usually don't progress in spiritual life. And that's not the sincere aspirants who go on retreat and then come back and practice what they've experienced in their retreat. Because where is the world but in the mind? We can't run away from the mind. We take it with us wherever we go. Swami Ashokananda, a disciple of Vivekananda, who was the previous head of the Vedanta Center in San Francisco, said, keep constantly occupied, work. See how Sri Ramakrishna made Holy Mother work. She was always busy. Both of them, Jnanis par excellence. Gargi, who was Swami Ashokananda's disciple and a renowned author of Vivekananda in the West, the 6-volume set, and other books, explained, I thought only people in a low state like me had to work all the time so as not to degenerate. She told this to the Swami. And Ashokananda Swami said, you think knowers of God don't work? Have you got some idea that you will reach a point where you can just sit back and dream? That is your goal? No, you will always have to work. The spiritually enlightened feel that they are not working. They are the witness, but their bodies and minds are intensely active. This is a very high state. So let's ask ourselves, what is the state of seeing inaction, and action in inaction? Let's pull this apart. I asked Swami Asheshananda, disciple of Holy Mother, how does a Jnani act? Swami Asheshananda replied, he knows that it's his Prakriti that is acting. So what is this Prakriti? Swami Prabhavananda explained, knowing oneself to be the Atman united with Brahman, one has no sense of being the doer of actions, but knows instead that it is the gunas that act. In this state, one becomes the witness of all actions proceeding from oneself, whether physical or mental. So Prakriti, we all know, is composed of these three forces called the gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, which operate in the psychic and in the physical world. In the physical world, sattva embodies equilibrium, rajas, the active principle, tamas, solidity and resistance. And in the human mind, sattva expresses itself as tranquility and purity, rajas as passion and restlessness, and tamas as stupidity, laziness, inertia. So the knower of Brahman transcends the three gunas, including sattva. Now what does this mean? In the Gita, 13th chapter, verse 14, Sri Krishna explains, doing the tasks of each sense, yet himself devoid of the senses, standing apart, he sustains. He is free from the gunas, but feels them. Again, Swami Prabhupada. In this passage, Sri Krishna conveys a beautiful meditation. And this is something that we can take with us as we're working. Brahman is the witness of the function of the gunas. Because of his presence within us, our senses are active. We cannot blink our eyes without that presence, yet we think that we are independent of God. That is why the purpose of spiritual practice is to renounce the ego, which hides the divine presence. We must strive to feel that reality behind our five senses. God is. With every breath, we must strive to feel that without him, we cannot breathe. As Vivekananda exhorted, do not seek for him, just see him. So in the Gita, again the 14th chapter, verses 22 to 25, Krishna tells us, a man is said to have transcended the gunas when he does not hate the light of sattva, or the activity of rajas, or even the delusion of tamas while these prevail, and yet does not long for them after they have ceased. He is like one who sits unconcerned and is not disturbed by the gunas. He knows that they are the doers of all actions and never loses this power of discrimination. He rests in the inner calm of the Atman. Vivekananda says this is the Jnani, who in the midst of the greatest silence and solitude finds the intensest activity, and in the midst of the intensest activity finds the silence and solitude of the desert. He has learned the secret of restraint. He has controlled himself. He goes through the streets of a big city with all its traffic, and his mind is as calm as if he were in a cave, which is what this woman must have seen when she saw Vivekananda embodied, where not a sound could reach him, and he is intensely working all the time. That is the ideal of karma yoga, and if you have attained to that, you have really learnt the secret of work. Swami Vivekananda felt that the picture that best represents inaction in action and action in inaction is Sri Krishna himself on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. That is the Gita personified, the higher self personified, the right hand in the Chinmudra, the gesture of imparting wisdom. Vivekananda posed before a friend as he felt Sri Krishna should be portrayed. And he said, "See how he holds the bridle of the horses so tight that they are brought to their haunches, with their forelegs fighting the air and their mouths gaping. This shows a tremendous play of action. Sri Krishna, whip in one hand and tightening the reins with the other, turns towards Arjuna with his childlike face, beaming with unworldly love, a calm and serene look, delivering the message of the Gita to his beloved comrade." This picture, Vivekananda says, of the preacher of the Gita conveys intense action in the whole body, with a face expressing the profound calmness and serenity of the blue sky. He explained the metaphysical secret behind the spiritual dichotomy in his November 1895 London lecture, Jnana and Karma. He said there are three states of mind: the active, the passive, and the serene. The passive state is characterized by slow vibrations, the active by quick vibrations, and the serene by the most intense vibrations of all. Know that the soul is sitting in the chariot. The body is the chariot, the outer senses are the horses, and the mind the reins, and the intellect the charioteer. So the greatest manifestation of power lies within the mind of the knower of Brahman, who has conquered his or her senses. In the Gita, 5th chapter, verse 27, Sri Krishna reveals what kind of power must be galvanized at will to achieve that renunciation in meditation. Sparshan kritva bahir bahyam, shutting outside the external objects. Shutting outside the external objects. The idea is, when the mind is deeply controlled, there is the sense of being in an inner space where all contact is outside and unable to get in. We can develop this. The Gyanis, after leaving their seat of meditation, can take that spirit of meditation with them throughout the day. So what are some other methods to attain that Jnani approach to karma yoga? Well, mantras are powerful tools to help us in any yoga we undertake. And in Jnana yoga, Om Tat Sat is one such mantra prescribed in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 17, verses 23 through 27. Swami Pravrajika, in his Gita commentary, explained, as we utter Om, we must try to feel its visible, perceptible presence. Again, as Swami Vivekananda expressed at one time, do not seek for him, just see him. What a wonderful truth. Where do we seek him? God is everywhere. We must learn to believe that, feel that, sense that, and see that. Next comes Tat. Tat means that, which refers to the absolute. Here, God is not described or defined in any way, only indicated. Then Sat means existence itself. For example, you and I exist, this universe exists, but the ultimate reality does not exist in the same phenomenal way. Rather, everything phenomenal exists because of that Sat, existence itself. Without Sat, there would be no other existence. So this mantra, Om Tat Sat, reminds us the divinity within all sentient and insentient things is pure existence, including our own self. So if we can remember Om Tat Sat in every thought and action, we cover everything with the presence of that supreme reality. Prabhupada also said, Sri Ramakrishna exemplified this practice in his life. Whenever he went to sit somewhere, to touch something, or to eat food, he would say, Om Tat Sat. In this way, he would see God everywhere and would have his consciousness in God. Whenever someone impure would approach him, he would also utter Om Tat Sat, and then thus bring out the divinity within that person. Swami Swahananda, the former head of the Vedanta Society and a disciple of Swami Vijnanananda, he used to use the mantra Hari Om in the same fashion. He would often repeat it throughout the day to bring his mind back to the reality. One can utilize these two mantras in a very natural way. But of course, if you're initiated, you can take your mantra wherever you go. And of course, that is not meant to be uttered audibly in the presence of others. So the main thing is this inwardness of character. And it's another sign if one sees in action. Swami Atulananda, a Western disciple, Guru Das Maharaj, who stayed with Swami Turiyananda at Shanti Ashrama, attempted to describe this giant of a Jnani, which Turiyananda was. He said on meeting him, one noticed a peculiar tendency expressed even in his eyes. Guru Dasa wrote, and that tendency was a certain reserve, a certain withdrawal of the mind inward. Part of the mind that was exercised outwardly was used to meet the demands of the external world, but another part was occupied on another plane and was not allowed to mix in the experiences of everyday life. This gave to his eyes often a faraway look, and in contact with people, it often made him appear absent-minded. Once Swami Turiyananda asked someone, who enjoys the show, the actor or the spectator? Learn to be the witness. Stand aside and see the play. Don't get involved. Don't talk much. Speech is silver. Silence is golden. Look and listen attentively. Many want to talk. Few care to listen. So the Jnani is unaffected by the pairs of opposites, even-minded in success and failure. Again, in the Gita, 4th chapter, verses 19 to 20, Krishna tells us, the seers say truly that he is wise who acts without lust or scheming for the fruit of the act. His acts fall from him. Its chain is broken, melted in the flame of my knowledge. Turning his face from the fruit, he needs nothing. The Atman is enough. He acts and is beyond action. One beautiful karma yoga practice in Jnana Yoga was divulged by the great Vedantin Swami Turiyananda. One young monk asked him, how should I study the Gita? And Swami Turiyananda replied, every week take one verse, memorize it, and live it for a week. That is how you study the Gita. So we might ask, well, what happens when we practice that? For example, in the second chapter of the Gita, when Sri Krishna explains to Arjuna how a knower of Brahman speaks, sits, walks, behaves, how an illumined soul performs action, when we memorize and internalize those verses from such a living scripture, which the Gita is, they work on us. And as we carry each verse with us throughout the day, it sinks deep into our mind and begins to modify how we speak, how we sit, how we walk, how we behave from the inside out. It invokes the mood of jnana into our actions and silently transforms our actions. Jnana and karma yoga become suffused. We then begin to understand Sri Krishna's teaching in the Gita, chapter 6, verse 3. Let him who would climb in meditation to heights of the highest union with Brahman take for his path the yoga of action. Then when he nears that height of oneness, his acts will fall from him, his path will be tranquil. So with the attainment of jnana, all karmas drop away. In the Mundaka Upanishad, chapter 2, section 2, verse 10, we read, "The knot of the heart, which is ignorance, is loosed. All doubts are dissolved. All evil effects of deeds are destroyed when he who is both personal and impersonal is realized." So karmas of this life and past lives are attached to the mind. And with the fire of knowledge, karmas are destroyed, and the seeds of future karmas are burnt up, except for prarabdha karma, which is why knowers of Brahman live out their span of life. So the Jnani who resides in the self and knows it's the gunas that act is not at their behest and requires very little sleep. Swami Shivananda, disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, explained, "We saw how little the master slept. Now and then he might get an hour or half an hour of sleep at the most. Most of the time he was in samadhi, and in the remaining time he spent in spiritual moods." Well, we're not Sri Ramakrishnas, and we're not Sri Sarada Devis, but we can practice this in action, to the point where our life becomes more stable, our breathing becomes more measured, we have a calmness of mind, and our sleep becomes deeper, and we need less and less hours of sleep. Though unsurpassed in his attainments as a Brahmagyani and Vijnani, Sri Ramakrishna was thorough about attending to details while in the normal plane of consciousness. So these go hand in hand. Sri Ramakrishna made the temple manager provide him with prasad every day. Now this surprised Gyan, because Sri Ramakrishna didn't care much for eating due to his delicate digestion. So was he exhibiting petty tendencies of his priestly class? Gyan wondered. Then Sri Ramakrishna explained to him, "Rani Rashmani bequeathed her estate to this temple so offerings could be distributed to devotees and sadhus. Offerings that come to my room are distributed in this way, but priests sell their share or give to their mistresses. Therefore, I fight for the share that comes here, so that Rasmani's wishes may be partially fulfilled." So this is Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga. As I previously explained, Ramakrishna was meticulous in household matters and trained his disciples to also be so. He taught them to use their discrimination in spiritual and worldly matters. The Jnani is not oblivious to the ways of the world, nor to the suffering of the world. Swami Vivekananda founded the Ramakrishna mission to institute the practice of Seva Yoga, a binary path of Jnana Yoga, acknowledging his master's teaching to serve Jiva as Shiva, to serve the living God. Work performed as worship of the one self in all. And in this way, Vivekananda harnessed the non-dual goal of Jnana Yoga, knowledge, to the methodology of Karma Yoga, action. He set Jnana Yoga in action through this selfless service. And herein, the Karma Yoga does not act simply to purify the mind, but is a direct means to self-realization. Swami Vivekananda stated in his talk, Practical Vedanta, Part 2, "We want to worship a living God. I have seen nothing but God all my life, nor have you. To see this chair, you first see God, and then the chair, in and through him. He is everywhere saying, I am. The moment you feel, I am, you are conscious of existence. Where shall we go to find God if we cannot see him in our own hearts and in every living being? Thou art all that exists, a wonderful living God who is the only fact in the universe." Vivekananda foresaw this path of work as worship would bring joy to the giver, elevate the receiver physically, intellectually, and spiritually, and thereby serve the nation. Service in the Ramakrishna mission is worship of the unity in diversity, the same God, the higher self, in all. Karma Yoga as Seva Yoga removes all false compartmentalizations between the secular social service and the sacred self-realization. The spiritual arena is our church, our workplace, our home, our every action. Vivekananda's concept of social service is socialization of the absolute. It unites the individual and the social goals. Spirituality becomes practical. Practicality is sanctified. He said, what is more practical than worshiping here, worshiping you? I see you, feel you, I know you are God. The moment I have realized God sitting in the temple of every human body, the moment I stand in reverence before every human being and see God in him, that moment I am free from bondage. Everything that binds vanishes, and I am free. What were the results? At first, there was opposition by some of the devotees and direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, and by outside orders of the Dasanami, to which we belong. When M., recorder of the Gospel, visited the Ramakrishna Mission Home of Service in Varanasi, one of the first Seva projects to take root in 1900 by a group of young men with just 4 annas and inspired by Vivekananda's teachings, he mentioned that Ramakrishna didn't approve of anyone performing social service before realizing God, possibly referring to Shambhu Malik, who requested Sri Ramakrishna to bless him before he started building hospitals and dispensaries. Ramakrishna told him, Shambhu Malik, It would be good if you can do these things in a spirit of detachment. But that is very difficult. Whatever you may do, you may always remember that the aim of this life of yours is the attainment of God. Swami Brahmananda, hearing M's comment, requested the young monk to inform M, "Mother, Sri Sarada Devi has just told us that the activities of the home of service were the service to the Master himself, and that he was tangibly present here. Now what do you say?" M laughed when he heard this, and he said, "How can I deny it anymore?" So at the turn of the 20th century, Vivekananda's disciples, Kalyanananda and Nischayananda, worked to establish the dispensary for the sadhus, the poor and the untouchables in Kankal, in our ashram there. But Orthodox sannyasins of the Shankara order shunned both swamis as scavenger monks, defiled by breaking caste and touching the excreta of those ailing. But Swami Dhanaraj Giri, the abbot of the Kailash Mat of the Shankara order, observed the selflessness of these two monks. In 1903, he encouraged two wealthy businessmen to finance the construction of the hospital ashrama for their medical relief work. The abbot also invited both swamis as his honored guests to the traditional congregational feast of the Dasanami order. With such support and recognition, the Ramakrishna order and Swami Vivekananda's reform monasticism became officially accepted by the traditional Shankara Dasanami sannyasins. Seva of the living God produced tangible, transformative effects on the character of those who were served. In the 1890s, Swami Akhandananda started education campaign in Khetri for the poor, famine relief in Murshidabad, and an orphanage in Sargachi. Inspired by one doctor's seva for the poor and his prayer, "O Lord, I do not want any kingdom nor heavenly pleasure, nor even escape from rebirth. I do want the affliction of all beings tormented by the miseries of life to cease. O Lord, is there any way I may enter into the hearts of all beings and always share the burden of their sufferings?" Swami Vivekananda praised his brother monk, Swami Akhandananda, to a disciple. "Look what a great hero he is in work. He is unaware of fear and death and doggedly does his work for the good of many and the welfare of all. It is true, power comes through practicing austerities. Again, working for others is also austerity. The practice of austerity intensifies altruistic feelings in an aspirant and actuates him to unselfish work, so also the pursuit of work for the sake of others purifies one's heart, and that leads him to the realization of the supreme Atman." One day, when Swami Premananda was about to start worship in the Belar Mat's old shrine, Swami Vivekananda came to the shrine to prostrate before the Master. "Brother," he said, "all these days you have been worshiping the Lord with flowers and sandal paste. Now start worshiping the living God." A brahmachari took over the Swami's puja, and Premananda Swami went out into the village of Belur, found an old sick widow, offered her treatment from the monastery's charitable dispensary, but she refused. Then he came across a few unwashed children and brought them back to the monastery. He cleaned them with soap and water, fed them, and sent them back home. Later, he divulged his spiritual experience to Swami Vivekananda. "When I was serving them," he said, "I felt I was actually serving the Master through living gods." So this is the ideal of Seva Yoga. For some, complete self-forgetfulness in worship. For others, it becomes the Sarvamukti ideal. In a July 3rd, 1897 letter to Mary Hale, Vivekananda divulged his feeling. May I be born again and again and suffer thousands of miseries so that I may worship the only God that exists, the only God I believe in, the sum total of all souls, and above all, my God the wicked, my God the miserable, my God the poor of all races, of all species, is a special object of my worship.
Pravrajika, Brahmaprana. I probably should have introduced you. I've known her so long, I forget that some of you haven't been around as long as I have. She was in the Santa Barbara convent for many years and in the Hollywood convent for many years. And then she went to Dallas and has built that center up. They've built a big new auditorium, and it's becoming quite a big center now. So she's been doing wonderful work. She's also done much editing and writing, and she's very good at always getting getting good questions to the old devotees and the old swamis. Whenever there's a visiting swami, she asks the best questions and gets the essence of their teachings out. So, will you be available to answer questions in the living room?
Maybe for about a half an hour?
Yeah, all right. So, you can do the same thing to her.
Oh,
and so we will let you close with a chant, and then you can have some refreshments, and then join her in the greenhouse living room.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
I should have also announced I don't have a topic for next Sunday, but it will be Swami Sarvadevananda speaking. And then the following Sunday we have a special